Hello and welcome. This is special Sunday coverage of Saratoga brought to you by In the Money Media and our friends at Adelphi Racing Club. Thrilled to report that Adelphi are back for another season working within the money. We're going to have coverage of Saratoga throughout the meet. We're also going to have some special videos, one involving the new Belmont going to be coming up this fall. Excited to get to talking about that when it's time. And another involving the new York-bred sale. We're going to talk about that because part of that video is going to be me probably really irritating today's guest as I ask way too many questions about the process. He is the bloodstock agent and racing manager for Adelphi Racing and a returning guest to the show, always popular, Joe Migliore. Joe, how are things?
Things are very good. Actually downstate right now on Long Island, right near Belmont, but heading back up to Saratoga later this afternoon. And hopefully that rain is cleared out and we'll have a good week ahead of us.
I want to ask you about a few different things. One of them will be the state of Adelphi Racing, but I want to talk to you about a fun thing about this very Sunday card. And I feel uniquely qualified as a guy who works in a very similar industry to what his father worked in, but in a different way, kind of like you, really, that your dad, Richard Migliore, going to be presenting the Mike Venezia Award on Sunday, which is, I know for jockeys, one of the most prestigious things they can win, not in short part because it's voted by their peers. What does that mean to you as a son to get to see your dad in a position like that?
Yeah, look, my father was dear friends with Mike Venezia and a rider, a veteran rider that he felt really kind of took him under his wing as he was a young rider and really taught him how to be a professional and how to conduct himself as a jockey. And they had a very close friendship and, obviously such an unfortunate thing that happened. But it's great that this award has kind of been revitalized and brought back to the forefront by, Naira and is presented up at Saratoga. I think it's also tremendous that the award this year is going to Nick Santagata, who is a retired rider that my father also rode with as well, that I knew growing up in the room. And Nick was a tremendous rider that I don't think gets enough credit for his accomplishments. I mean, he won over 4,000 races and all up and down the East Coast and very close with him and the Santagata family. So it's going to be a great day Sunday. Seeing Nick get the Venezia Award and also seeing the Venezia family is special every year up there. So really looking forward to Sunday for that reason.
It's going to be great. We'll talk about the races, but I'm sure they'll have part of that on the Fox broadcast that folks can check out. Very, very meaningful, and I'm thrilled to get to see how that plays out. We'll get to the Adelphi question for you, and I'm even going to share the website, adelphiracing.com. This is the place you can go to learn more about the work that Joe and Matt Kater and the rest of the team do. I've been a member of Adelphi Racing now for, I think this is my 4th year in a row. And, I've been a lucky guy. I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things in horse racing. For me, my top memory in racing, honestly, is that day we got to spend together, Joe, in Saratoga, getting to go to the winner's circle with a group of friends. It was so magic. Gem Min 10 doing the business that day. I think about it often, as much as any pick six or any other great race result that I saw. Obviously, one of the special things about Adelphi is being able to deliver that kind of experience to the members of the club. This group of like-minded individuals. It's really fun. No ordinary racing partnership. I was just curious, and this is me asking as much as anything else because we haven't talked in a while. What's the state of the partnership? What are we looking forward to this summer?
Yeah, look, I mean, things are going great. We've definitely grown a little bit and have some new members and, we're up to just over 30 horses now. Not that long ago, we had 5 horses. So I think that's a testament to the great partners like yourself that have really had a good time with us and trust their faith in us to go out there and find them talented racing prospects. And we've got horses running at all levels, New York-bred open company. Obviously, the summertime is always a whole lot of action. It was exciting to get off the duck early the first weekend with Better Lucky Than Good. And we're always looking for those moments like that Gem Min 10 day Gem was such a cool horse, and if he could get out loose on the front end, he was pretty brave. And super happy to report he very recently has been adopted by the Colorado State University equestrian team. So
awesome.
We're keeping good tabs on Gem and all of our retired horses, that we have out there. And he landed in a very good spot. And I got a very nice message from one of the team members the other day. So it's not just about the racetrack. It's about after too. And a lot of action on the track, but always checking in on our old friends like Joe Migliore.
We'll keep the generational theme going, because one person who's going to be very excited to hear that news about the equestrian team is my daughter, Perrin. She still mentions Gem Mid-10 anytime he comes up. Wasn't he that really nice horse we met? He had such a pleasant disposition. When we went to go see him in the stall, he just won her heart forever. It was really, really cool. So thank you for those memories, and we'll have to follow. We now have a route in University Equestrian.
I will get you some fresh content of him in his second life now, and I'm sure that will go over as a big hit. Yeah,
that's so awesome. One other thing I just want to tease before we get into these races on Sunday is a project that you and I will be working on together. Harassing you at the sale. We're going to film, hopefully, the process of buying a horse. If nothing else, the process of you kicking me out of the barn. That'll be entertaining too. But really looking forward to this New York-bred sale. I mean, for you, this must be one of the events of the season, right? You guys have had big success at this sale in the past, and I imagine you're very much looking forward to it.
Oh, for sure. This is definitely a focal point sale of our year, especially on the yearling sales side of the coin. Look, we love the New York-bred program. We're a New York-based partnership. Where else would you go to shop and support the New York breeders and the program in general than that Fasig-Tipton New York-bred sale? It has very much, in a lot of ways, become a select New York-bred sale. The Fasig-Tipton team does an amazing job. To my understanding, they got a record number of applicants, of people applying their horse to the sale this year. And their selection team does a very good job of, going through all of the applicants, going out and inspecting them physically. So that the 300 or so New York-breds that you're going to see on the grounds there are sort of the top 300 in the crop in a lot of ways, maybe outside of some breeders that, breed to race that don't offer up their stock for sale. So we always look to buy a number of horses out of this, sale, usually anywhere from at a minimum 2 to upwards of 5 or 6 New York-breds. And that'll be kind of the first additions that we make to our 2-year-old class, of 27. From there, they will all go down to Ocala and begin the breaking process. But yeah, it's going to be a great time. I'm looking forward to having you out. Don't think I'm going to be shouting to get away from me. And there are no bad questions at all. If anything, I want people asking as many questions as they come to mind, because the more comfortable you are and the more understanding you have of the process and the horses we end up purchasing, the better you're going to feel about jumping in and getting involved in one of those horses. So we usually welcome a lot of partners out. Looking forward to us maybe filming a little content piece while we're there at the sale.
So our analysis proper will start with race number 6, but I'd be accused of a host fail if I didn't ask you about the Adelphi runner who goes in race number 5. This is number 2, Dreams of Rome. What can you tell us about this one and this spot?
Yeah, so Dreams of Rome is one of these horses that back in 2024 we purchased from the Saratoga New York-bred sale. He is a stunning, good-looking son of Tacitus, very big and imposing as well. Given his size, and he developed a little bit of a tough-to-handle nature as a 2-year-old and kind of in the early phases of his life. This has been a bit of a journey getting him to this point where, he made his debut as a 3-year-old in April. But a lot of hard work's been put into him, and I do think he's improving and developing. Everything with him, though, is very much kind of having to repeat the experience to get a hang of it. It was great to see him break his maiden in his first try on the grass, but he was very green in running that day, even though he won. He caught a tremendously tough starter allowance field last time, where the winner is an undefeated son of slumber named Kark Brothers, who's actually turned a lot of people's heads. I believe Kark Brothers also set the track record that day at Aqueduct for 1 mile and 3/16 on the grass. So he's coming out of a very tough race. He's probably catching a little bit easier field than that one. He has a right to improve, but he's at sometimes his own worst enemy. So we very much feel like more, racing experience is going to be his friend. And even if it's not Sunday that he puts it all together, he could be putting it all together down the line.
You're telling me that a horse with Tappet blood can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, that certainly reared its head in the breaking and pre-training process.
I'm as shocked as you, but of course they're also.
And if you do notice, he is a gelding now. So,
yeah. Hopefully the calming down will lead to bigger things down the line, if not on Sunday. Let's dive into these races, my friend. Speaking of New York breds, we've got a New York bred maiden special going as race number 6. 7 furlongs on the dirt here. How are we going to light this candle, my friend?
Yeah, I struggled to get too creative in this race a little bit. And there's, because of the horses that have run, I'm not terribly inspired by anybody. And then you have 2 first-time starters from very live barns. You have a first-time starter from the Chad Brown barn. I always, as a handicapper, it's tough for me to read the ones that come up from Monmouth. It's not that they're not live. There's plenty of them actually run huge. But this is one that chips in from Chad's Monmouth string. And then you have another firster on the outside for Linda Rice, owned by Chester Broman, by McLean's Music. I know that a lot of McLean's Musics can be quick and sometimes precocious. I know this horse is debuting as a 3-year-old, but also shows a snappy 47 flat out of the gate most recently. Of the established runners in here, I guess Linda Rice's other participant would be one to look at. Does come kind of out of a sneaky maiden race where there was a few firsters touted and firsters ran 1-2 in that field. But found it hard to hang and grab a hold of any kind of horse that would be, over 4 or 5 to 1 here, and felt like the firsters will probably take money. And if you want an established horse, the 3 Music in Motion is arguably the most accomplished of those.
4, 8, and 3, the numbers you'll be spreading around with. I did think that Modest McLean was the one that I wanted to land with. 2 siblings to make it to the races. They both won on debut. One was stakes placed, the other graded placed. It's interesting. The McLean's Music numbers with first-time starters have cooled a bit the past couple of seasons, but I think that's just the natural progression, right? As first-year sires come into the market, they may be getting more of the more precocious dams. And the fact is that the McLean's Music numbers are still above average. Usually with Linda Rice, I like them second time out. And if this horse runs with any credit, I'm going to probably upgrade significantly next time. But I don't know. Against this group, Modest McLean, the 8, might be ready to just win right away. I'm going to go with that one. You do make a good point that maybe my getting into these firster statistics isn't that significant when you're dealing with a 3-year-old debutante as opposed to a 2-year-old debutante. But hey, when there aren't running lines to look back into, I try to dig into the pedigree. That's the one that seemed the one for me in that spot. Let's move on to race number 7. We've got a turf allowance going 5.5. Looks like there's going to be some real pace in here, and I thought that could make things set up nicely for number 1, Credit Worthy. This horse has good finish. It's a very long layoff, but speaking of stats, Chad Brown, very good at bringing horses back off long layoffs, especially at Saratoga. I looked into the numbers, 23%, solid win percentage. But the thing that really impressed me is if you bet them all, you'd only lose a penny for every $2. It's a $1.99 return on investment on a $2 bet. For a trainer like Chad Brown, who catches money just because it's his name in the program, I thought that was pretty impressive. One other I wanted to mention was the 5, Key Waden. This is an angle I bring up all the time on these shows. When they get on turf for the first time and they improve significantly, very often the crowd will expect them to regress, and sometimes they just keep improving because it's the surface that caused them to get better. That field last time was able to wire. I don't think that'll be the case here, but given how Key Waden finished in that spot, maybe can stalk and pounce here. I liked it 1 in 5, but I think there's a lot of ways to go in here, Joe. Who do you like?
Yeah, this is an extremely contentious affair, and like you said, there is a ton of speed signed on here, and it does look like most of the speed kind of drew towards the outside. So I'm sure that this is going to involve a lot of riders wanting to establish that early position and try to get over down before the turn there. for that reason, I kind of went back and forth. The other element of the horses with speed here is that a lot of them are quite accomplished runners, but also a little bit long in the tooth and possibly a little bit past their best. Like I really struggle with what to do with a horse like Bring the Band Home in here, who had this unbelievable 2-race combo at last year's meet where he posted 2 tremendous triple-digit buyers, but then kind of fell off after that, then returned off the long layoff in the Harvey Pack, but was part of a suicidal pace in the Harvey Pack there. But it was kind of hard for me to work out how that doesn't happen again. How do they not fly in here? So I did look down towards the inside. I'll definitely be using the horse that you mentioned, Credit Worthy, prominently. Now, this is a big step up in class for Credit Worthy, though, is kind of the one thing that gave me pause. Combine that with the layoff. And given that this horse is going to take money, did want to kind of take a look at Clock Tower, the number 4. I think Clock Tower has had races where he's forward, but also races where he's kind of sat off. His close in the Shakertown, I thought, was impressive against a very high quality field. Then he kind of battled with Rarolo and 26 Black, or who are 2 heavy hitters in this kind of division themselves. A huge step up to the Jaipur, where he was 35-1 last time. This is a much more realistic spot and the condition that he fits. And if anybody's going to be able to maybe take just back off this contentious early pace, it's probably him. And I think he should project a good trip, possibly from mid-pack down towards the inside. And I landed on the number 4 Clock Tower here.
Yeah, I think that makes an awful lot of sense. If I'd mentioned a third one, it would have been Clock Tower. Hopefully the 4 and the 1 can get us through. We've got extra stakes racing on this card as a result of some of the cancellations we've had, which means we've got the Grade 2 Glens Falls going as race number 8. We're going 1.5 miles on the grass. Joe, we'll keep it with you.
Yeah, look, I mean, what a race this came up. Just a really interesting element, I think, to this race is that you have 4 fillies coming out of the Robert Dick Memorial at Delaware, where they finished 1, 2, 3, 4. There was one key trip in there, which was from the number 3, Beleza. Jaime Rodriguez kind of looked to slip up the inside of Storm Miami and just ran out of room in there and had to check. It actually led to Storm Miami being disqualified, whereas Dona Clota and Alluring Angel kind of switched outside and had those momentous runs that carried them to finish, first and second. But there's many other faces in here for all 4 of those coming out of the Robert Dick to deal with. Obviously, probably the most prominent name of them is last year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf winner, Jazora. Obviously highly publicized, but she's been transferred to trainer Bill Mott. I'm reading some quotes in the DRF. Bill Mott just kind of felt like that she got a little keen last time and actually thinks that the longer distance should, be of a benefit to her. Another key horse in here is the number 8 Speed Shopper for Will Walden, who's having a phenomenal year. And he also made a comment that after the New York Heat felt his filly just wants the 3-turn races. So 2 heavy hitters themselves, and then a new European face in, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but
Servi, I think.
Servi, yeah. And obviously she carries form lines from Europe that are more than strong enough to be highly competitive here as well. I usually end up using all of these new face Euros defensively at a bare minimum. I will probably use combinations of the 6, 8, and 9, and then mix in Beleza as well, who I felt probably had the most compromised trip in the Robert Dick.
Excellent analysis, top to bottom there. Servi is the one I wanted to talk about the most. It can be so tricky to ship, as we've talked about, but this horse is fast, handles a variety of conditions, has done well on tight left-handed tracks, and I just thought might have a bit of a hidden class edge when you go back to some of those French Group 1s where she was going close. And I'm willing to take a little shot against Gazora in this spot. I want to make her prove it. That's a thing you hear a lot in Europe that you don't hear as much in the States. And I'll do a little tangent and ask you a question. But that idea that sometimes when horses get to a certain age or a certain point in their development, they lose essentially the speed to deal with the shorter distances, but you can stretch them out and keep them at that tip-top quality. Is that something that you've heard talked about over here?
Certainly from trainers in the past. It is probably more of a horse by horse kind of case. But it's certainly a plausible explanation that, maybe just don't quite have the turn of foot or the legs under them at an older age to kind of keep up. But if you stretch them out in slower cadence of race, that could result in some better results. To be fair to Jazora in some respects, she probably does want a bit further than what she ran last time. You still would have liked to see her run a little bit more than she did last time. I totally understand where you're at, that it could be a bit of a too short of a price, and having to want to see, hey, can you reproduce that Breeders' Cup effort again? From a plain, Maltese perspective, it's a tough horse to leave out, but definitely not a horse that you would want to lean on.
I will use two from the Dick as well. Bellezza, you made the case about the trip last time, the 3-runner, but I'll also leave Storm Miami in the mix simply because it's the inner, and this could be a pace angle in a race where it seems like a lot of these might just let Storm Miami be out there winging early. Very questionable stamina, don't get me wrong, but when you're dealing with a double figure price, it's very hard to have all the boxes checked, as it were. I'll mess around with the 6, the 5, and the 3 and see if we can't get a result in the Glens Falls. We've got stakes action continuing in race number 9 with the rescheduled Kurland Stakes. Who do you think wins it?
Yeah, this is really intriguing, right? Because I think the two horses that are going to be your obvious, shortest prices on the board are going to be Chief Wallaby, who, competed in the Triple Crown Series, and, the endless amount of debate over his Derby trip that went on. We all probably stood on different, angles or opinions there. But I felt like he very much kind of had his chances in the Belmont, and just kind of proved to not be quite as good as the top horses that competed, throughout the series, this year. But that being said, he's dropping down into a field that, you would think that he is more than capable of handling, and then a horse that had a lot of buzz in his 2-year-old year, and then probably, didn't quite materialize in the lead up to the Derby was Blackout Time. And, after the disappointing Arkansas Derby run, was kind of, freshened up and then brought back, and he really popped in that allowance at Churchill last time. I'm a little bit reticent to entirely trust either one of them. And I am a user of different Sheets numbers outside of just buyer figures. And honestly, unless a horse like Chief Wallaby's to get back to some of his Ragozin numbers before the Derby and the Belmont, and then also based on Blackout Times last summer, there's other horses in here that are not that far away from them, in this field. And that, kind of includes the 1 Golfy, believe it or not, and then also the number 4 Tiernanog with some of his dirt numbers. So a couple of wacky price ideas here. You do have an interesting horse stretching out for the Chad Brown Barn, and Sea Strike as well. I don't know if this race is as simple as the 6-7, and I may try to get creative here.
I like it. I mean, if you can beat those two, the way you're going to be turning the equity in the pools in your favor is significant. And I see your case. I have signed the papers. I'm walking away from Chief Wallaby. I was one of the Chief Wallaby, he made the move into the fast pace. He had the trouble. I want to bet him back in the Belmont. And I could, if I worked, conjure an excuse saying he simply moved too early in the Belmont, but he just hasn't finished his races the way that I want to see since that Florida Derby. He hasn't come on with the blinkers the way I thought he would. He can win, certainly, but I'm okay letting him beat me. Blackout Time's the one I want. There was so much buzz around this horse heading into the Breeders' Cup. I thought there were reasons. I mainly bet Ted Nafi, but I did have backups on Blackout Time planned before he scratched. I thought there was a world in which he could reverse that form. Obviously was not on form early in the year, but I just felt like that Churchill run, I know it was in the slop, but it just looked like a return to form. And I'm willing to stand alone with him here and say, hey, I'm going to nail my colors to that mass. This is a horse I've always admired. And then, of course, there's did you follow this funny thing? Remember how back in the day there was the story about how Bill Mott would always win a race on his birthday? Do you remember that angle?
The intern in the press box days, I knew full well about that. Yeah,
we're going back about 15 years.
Yeah.
So originally this race scheduled on Bill Mott's birthday, now rescheduled for Kenny McPeak's birthday. How about that for an angle? Blackout time to the hoop.
I've heard crazier things work out even better. But I think there's also value in what you just said, though, too. You know, if you don't trust Chief Wallaby, one way to go against it is to kind of spread this race and get a horse even outside of Blackout Time home. And that can really set you up for a nice score in the multis. But the other way to create yourself value is to single Blackout Time if you believe in him, and then give yourself more flexibility in other legs. So I think both ways of attacking it are viable. And I think what we're both saying is that we're a little tired of Chief Wallaby.
Yeah, and I'll clap him back to the winner's circle and welcome him back.
Oh yeah, he'll win for sure now. Yeah,
cool horse, but I want to go a different direction. Gazora and Chief Wallaby could win. I will not be cashing many tickets, but I'll be thrilled to see them. The good for a sporting point of view, maybe less so from a gambling point of view.
Well, we have our fan caps, and we have our
exactly. Both of us know a lot about wearing many different caps. We have another stake to talk about. The Grade 3 Adirondack comes up next. 2-year-old fillies going the 6.5. Who do you like in here?
There was an interest. I think that the horse that's going to take the most play is probably the 3 Pierrette. Yep. She's obviously done nothing wrong, and she's now 2 for 2, whereas a lot of these other ones are coming in here off of just one debut victory. The horse I found interesting in here, and I'm not necessarily saying this horse is going to be a price, but Safi Joseph and his owners have done a great job of making these private purchases. Sometimes from obscure tracks. I don't want to call Lone Star an obscure track. It's not. But, from tracks outside of the A-level circuits, let's say.
The mid-majors.
And they've had a lot of success with that. And this is pretty clearly a private purchase here. This filly loomed up around the field and just absolutely romped away. Now, I know it was state breds there. But she actually received a sheet number that was more than in line with the rest of some of the flashier A-circuit debut winners here. Flavian Pratt takes the call, and I think it would be foolish to probably ignore the number 2 Caroline's Girl in here.
Ooh, I love that idea. And just to your point about maybe the buyer figure published being low, you go back and you look at what she ran against Caroline's Girl last time, you see a ton of figure improvement. Kamikaze Cowgirl came back, improved the figure 15 points on buyer and won. Skylift improved it 12 points. Wicked Start 16 points. So yeah, that 62 buyer, I'm going to go ahead and say it, almost definitely low. So with that little bit of information, I'm going to definitely be working some Caroline's Girl on my tickets. Would you be interested in backing Pierrette as well, potentially in multis, or did you just mention her because we think she'll be the favorite?
I think you definitely have to include her. Look, she's obviously done nothing wrong. She's been able to sit off paces. In a weird way, maybe there's a slight lack of speed in this race. Some of these, 2-year-old stakes, did you see? It's like, 5 horses that went wire to wire in their debut. That's not necessarily the case here. Maybe it's possible that the 8 Stress Relief is the one you kind of find in front early here. But, I just felt like the 2 and the 3 were probably my A's, if you will.
Gotcha. Spot. I like Stress Relief, actually. I just really thought the visual impression of that debut was good, winning so easily, geared down late. I get you probably wasn't beating much. That field is 0 for 6 since. But, you can only beat who they put in the gate against you. And there's a nice pedigree here. The dam was a multiple stakes winner. I think they might have been Louisiana bred stakes, but still, I mean, hey, there's quality there.
It's hard to ignore anything by not this time as well.
Exactly. And he doesn't need much introduction, does he? So I was going to row in with the 8. I had Pirette on the backup line. Just since we're having a deep discussion of this race, the other horse that could well go the favorite, I wanted to get your take on. That's the number 6, Scarlet Begonia. I can argue it either way, right? She definitely showed some class running and getting the job done there, but it was fast early, and it's another one of those. I'm not sure what she was beating. Certainly one to respect. I thought maybe at the price one to take on, but certainly a horse we should talk about for a sec. Did you like her much?
No, without a doubt. And Life is Good is off to a great start. He's up towards the top of the freshman sire table right now. And look, the Brad Cox barn just churns out impressive horses, impressive 2-year-olds every single year. You do need to kind of draw your line somewhere. I won't be shocked at all if she runs a monster race, but just felt like I wanted to lean a few different directions.
Let's get to the nightcap, my friend. Some bread and butter stuff to close it out. We got state-bred fillies, maiden claiming 35s. When it comes to this pick 6 and all these late picks at Saratoga on Sunday, how are we going to get paid?
Listen, this was a tough one to really love anybody in this field. This is a hungry bunch for sure. This is pretty much the bottom in terms of the maiden claiming New York-bred races on offer, at least at this current time. I know a lot of people kind of see maybe in the wintertime, state-bred maiden 25. The price is just higher. This is the same group of kind of individual horses, though. There is really not a lot to go on in here. I mean, the morning line favorite is the Tim Hills filly that, had I'd say one okay 2-year-old race, last year, but most recently was seen at Monmouth, not doing very much in a turf sprint, maiden claiming turf sprint. The horse that I kind of wanted to get a little creative on was the number 9 Quell.
Me too.
Hasn't done a lot of running in the 2 starts, one on the turf, one on the dirt. This is kind of just the logical place to return, I feel like. Does put the blinkers on, is off a little bit of a freshening, but felt that maybe with the outside draw, picking up Santana, blinkers on, maybe could go forward a little bit. And let's be honest, it's not going to take a ton of running to be competitive in here. And actually, this horse owns one of the higher fire speed figures in the field. So I'd probably take a look at that one. But this is one of those events that I would not fault anyone if you have an opinion or some goofy idea in here, because these are the kinds of races you do see wacky results in at times.
It's that kind of race. Yeah. If you maybe a chance to throw up the all ball in a spot or two, if you can.
It would feel good to have it.
I do think Quell is the right one. Very tough go of things last time too. That was a tricky trip. Chasing inside, hit the rail, game over after that. Was a little bit bet there. It was, believe it or not, I think you will agree with me based on what you said. That was a tougher spot than this, I think.
Yes.
And this one, it might not mean a thing. But the other one I was interested in, the 7 tactically, Santana rode both last time and ends up here. I'm not saying that's like an angle, but it makes me feel better about her chances. And then the 7 tactically, this one did catch money at one point at the maiden special weight level. No chance right from the start with that trip, and just could easily wake up. Just a little bit of unexposed form. 9-7 for me to close it out. But yeah, if you were playing a group ticket or something and could afford more, it's one of those old as many as you can afford type situations.
Without a doubt. And I think you make a good point too with these kind of spots. You want to lean towards more lightly raced horses that could, find some improvement because they've only had a start or 2 starts, or sometimes even a first, or it could be very live in here, versus the ones that have had multiple chances that this is just what they are.
Right. Great stuff, Joe. Really appreciate you coming on here. We'll do it again soon. We're going to have Adelphi shows all summer long. We've got to get Matt on camera. Right? He loves to do this stuff, but he never wants to come on with me. He's always like, ask Joe. And I'm never mad about that because I always love having you, but we're going to have to pull him in here to do some actual handicapping. I know he loves it.
He's in the batter's box. He's on deck. So we'll see him next.
Love it. But we'll have you again before too long. Look forward to working with you this summer. If you want to learn more about Adelphi Racing Club and the benefits of membership, adelphiracing.com. That's the place to go and check that out. For Joe Migliore and our friends at Adelphi Racing, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.